I'm Tom Leonard, the host of the Gamers Change Lives podcast. When it comes to esports, I am not the expert. I'm more of an explorer. The goal of the podcast is to talk to esports entrepreneurs and others around the world to learn how esports can create jobs and maybe inspire others to do just that. Our tagline is play games, create jobs, change lives. And here in season 2, we're talking to experts in sponsorship, investment, and more to show how to generate revenue for your esports business. It takes money to create jobs. We call this season Follow the Money. Today, I'm honored to have Dave Harris from Australia. He's the managing director at Guinevere Capital. We're going to hear where that name came from in a minute. He's also an investor and former chairman at Excel Esports and a founding partner at League of Legends Circuit Oceania. Hey, show us your headphones there.
Yeah, these are LEC headphones. So for a 10 million franchise fee, you get a great set of Logitech headsets. So we appreciate sponsor support over there.
You sound really good. So they're working.
Excellent.
So welcome, Dave.
Good to be here.
So where are you speaking from?
I'm in Sydney, Australia at the moment. I'm usually perpetually jet lagged. I spend a lot of time over in Europe and a little bit of time in the US. But yeah, it's great to be back in Sydney at the moment and spending most of the month here.
Got it. Now you have a really good background for our season 2 in talking about investment, in particular in esports. But we kind of want to start out. What got you interested in gaming and esports in particular?
It probably shows my age. I made a play-by-email game when I was at university. We got about 10,000 sign-ups, made about $50,000, which was big money back then. But yeah, that was sort of the mid to late 90s, War of Wizards it was called. And then I sort of had a break from gaming and tech. I was actually working traditional sports. So I had worked in international cricket, Premier League football, initially in sports medicine, did the MBA at Oxford, moved into sports business, did a bit of consulting at Boston Consulting Group, a bit of sport and entertainment consulting, and then my last real job, in inverted commas, I was a general manager at National Rugby League, which is one of the big sports codes in Australia. But I left in 2016 to start Guinevere Capital, a sports investment business. And then, yeah, that's just when esports was probably really starting to take off, particularly in this region. Yeah, brought together two loves of gaming and sports, which when I first started out, I probably didn't see converging.
So Guinevere was your first esports job? Your first esports?
Yes. So Guinevere was actually going to be a sports investment firm. We're going to buy a few big traditional sports teams in Australia. One of them being the Newcastle Knights, and the joke was Lady Guinevere chasing knights. Hence the name Guinevere came through. Yeah. No one can spell it or say it, so I kind of regret it, but at least it stands out. So yeah, we were going to buy some traditional sports teams, and then just bought an esports team as a bit of a side project, basically. But just saw what was happening everywhere else in the world, and didn't think Australia and New Zealand were going to go on a different tangent. So we pivoted all in esports, which was a bit of a leap of faith back in 2016. But yeah, it proved a fairly shrewd move. The valuations of Australian institutional sports teams have gone nowhere near as far as esports. So yeah, we were the first movers back then, and there's definitely been a first mover advantage. You've gone the right places in esports over the years.
Do you see a lot of correlation, a lot of similarity between traditional sport and esports?
I do, and it's a bit controversial because I think some people have pivoted too hard in the traditional sports model. I think people would point at some of the Activision Blizzard franchises, etc., where they've gone too far down the traditional sports model. But I think the underlying business model is the same. You've got 5 sort of revenue streams. You've got broadcast and sort of data rights. You've got sponsorship. You've got merchandise, not just physical merchandise, hoodies, but digital in-game merchandise. You've got sort of membership subscriptions, and then you've got sort of game day and prize money. So yeah, at a high level, the mix is slightly different, but you can think about it in very similar terms.
So you are our first guest from Australia on the podcast, and I'm just curious, what's esports like in Australia these days? Is it growing as fast as it is elsewhere?
Yeah, it's on a sharp growth trajectory, but I always say different regions are at very different stages of the esports journey. Korea's been going for a very long time. And we've probably done well being early movers in some of the regions that are a little bit behind. So Australia and New Zealand being one of them, where we're certainly not as advanced as many of the Asian countries. And even in UK, where we're involved, Europe is huge for esports, but UK was a little bit behind. So yeah, I think Australia and New Zealand are earlier in the journey, and yeah, we've had incredible growth, and it's been a great journey. But we are subscale, and we are quite isolated on this side of the world. So you've got to build a fit for purpose model, and I think it goes for every region out there. You just need to acknowledge you're not China. You probably don't have the same sort of venture capital going in as US. So you need to build something to the geography you're in. Even though esports is global, when it comes to the local stuff, there are nuances.
So, are a lot of times when we talk to people, particularly in Africa, there's issues with ping rates with where the servers are. Now, Australia, you have your own servers in the country, right? So there's not an issue there.
Yeah, well, again, we're lucky that we do actually have reasonable ping, depending where you are. There's servers in Sydney. One of the challenges on the global scale, which is, again, better than Africa, but we're really isolated here, so we can only sort of play against our own sort of region, which is a very small player base. Whereas if you're in Japan, you can play against Korea. If you're Latin America, you can play against on the NA servers. So yeah, one of our challenges has always been our geographical isolation, and it's not a technical problem; it's a speed of light problem. We're just too far away from the main servers to be able to scrim and play. So I think a lot of our early success with our teams was we actually sent them over to Korea to boot camp and train and play with the best, which obviously cost money, but that really gave them a buff. And it also happened with Excel Esports this year when between splits they went to Korea to really try and play on those better servers. So yeah, our infrastructure's not too bad. It depends where you are in Australia, but in Sydney and Melbourne it's fairly good, which is where most of our population is. But yeah, you're stuck amongst a small player base playing against each other.
And you also have the issue with the time of day. It's like
Yes.
In Australia, it's like it really is the other side of the world from Europe.
That's right, and I appreciate one of you's up early, one of you's up late. But yeah, when you're trying to coordinate between sort of the European African time zone and the North American time zone, someone always gets a short straw.
Yes, it was Reginald today, so he's up early. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about investment in a little bit more detail about Guinevere Capital. So is Guinevere, is it a VC? Is it venture capital?
I never know how to describe us because we're very operational, we're very hands-on. So we are building our own portfolio, but we do invest in a lot of companies through to early stage stuff. Some of them we sort of roll in, sort of make a synergistic portfolio without using too much jargon, and some of them we just sort of take strategic stakes in to try and potentially roll in later once they hit certain scale. So at the moment we're actually going through a process of reverse listing a lot of our projects onto London Stock Exchange, which will help us consolidate it, and then we'll be a listed company with a number of projects within it. The big one outside of that is Excel Esports, where we were sort of the early original investor, but that's had a lot of private equity money come in now. So we're down to minority stakeholder status in that. But yeah, we've had a lot of sort of big London City money and private equity money come in that portfolio. So yeah, so long story short, I don't throw tags around, but VC is probably the level we invest at. But yeah, we're not technically a venture capital company with our model.
Yeah, because one of the reasons that we want to talk to you, we want to talk to people around the world to kind of get a feel for what the industry is like. A lot of the people that we're talking to that we have in our audience, they're interested in finding out how to get investors, but knowing the ecosystem, knowing how things work and how things work in maybe in Australia versus US versus Africa, it's like it's always a learning curve that way. So we always like to talk about
different. I think the structure, no matter what investment you look at, if you look at the levels, there's seed capital, which is sort of like your friends and family round, or angel investors, where they'll write those really small checks to get up and running and a proof of concept, and to be honest, that's where most esports came from back in the day before there was all these big numbers thrown around, and then the challenge is to get there from there to that next level, and that's where the VCs have been coming in. Particularly sort of like 2016, 2017, there was a lot of VC interest. And then the challenge is to get from VC up to that scale where private equity comes in, which is that next level up. and then beyond that, potentially sort of listing on an exchange around the world. It's not always sequentially like that, but they're the steps. And we do a lot of early stage stuff. We try to do less now, but the challenge is it's very hard to get from that early stage through to the sort of where the bigger checks are being written, and that's why we operate trying to bridge that. We're now sort of at the larger end trying to list stuff, but we do a lot of work trying to bring through some of the early stage projects to be relevant at that level.
Are most of your investments in Australia?
A lot in Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. So Australia and New Zealand is where we started. Europe we see as a much larger scale market. I lived over there for 10 years. I've got dual citizenship with a British passport. And yes, as I said, it was slightly less developed, which we saw as a big opportunity. So sort of ANZ and Europe is where we span. The US is just so much capital being invested in its own backyard. It's oversaturated in our view, so it's not somewhere we want to charge in. China is its own beast. Southeast Asia, we have a lot of conversations over there, and there's probably sort of a potential expansion area for us. Latin America is tough to operate from the outside. You don't really have those. There's a bit of a volatile market. I'll run through the entire world here. Middle East, I think, is a huge growth market, and there's a lot of investment actually from that region going in at the moment. I think India is another growth market, but similar to Southeast Asia, is going to be more mobile focused. And then you've got Africa, which is probably one of those stages that those countries is a lot earlier on the journey as well. Has potential if you look at the population, but it also has its challenges with infrastructure, etc.
Do you do much investment in mobile organizations?
No, but there's a huge opportunity there. But to date, we haven't. There's a degree of snobbery as well between sort of the PC gaming and the mobile gaming. But I think people just underestimate how large that market is, particularly in the developing regions, which Southeast Asia, Africa, India, etc. Is probably going to be the primary the primary mode. Because we do a lot of stuff, like we had a big stadium tournament at Melbourne Park where they have the Australian Open tennis a couple of weekends ago. I think part of it is actually working out how to deliver it, because they have done some things, cool things previously with Honor of Kings and Clash of Clans, etc. with the stage. But when you're trying to make a cool production, it's just a little bit easier with PC gaming than mobile gaming, and just PCs are bigger in the more developed markets, which is where we've been focused. But I'm not saying we always will be.
So most of your investments, are they with teams, with tournament organizers, with venues, content creators, or all the above?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. So we started with teams. That was an easy sort of natural entry point for a lot of people and entrepreneurs. And for myself, with the sports model, it sort of made sense. But I think our model is actually sort of staying close with publishers, and working closely with the publishers who are the kingmakers in this sector. Yes. And I think it's always dangerous when people are doing some really cool third-party stuff, but the access to the API or the IP can be yoinked at any stage. Obviously, there's some publishers like Valve who are a bit more hands off, but we've worked really closely with Riot Games, to a lesser extent Activision Blizzard, but we've become that sort of trusted partner and safe set of hands. So they gave us the rights to run the league in this entire region, Oceania, for League of Legends, in conjunction with ESL. I'm also involved in some tech plays, which is probably the part you didn't mention there, but I'm on the board of Skybox. We're doing some really cool stuff working with publishers, taking data out of APIs to rebuild maps, which can be used in the broadcast and for training tools. So we sort of operate across the ecosystem in Australia and New Zealand, where we're more at a league level just because of the scale, but with Excel and other regions with larger regions, then we're probably more at the franchise team level. But outside of that, our biggest focus is actually on infrastructure, tech, support services. So we have another number of agencies and tech plays, which are probably the long term are going to be the bigger pieces. Yeah.
In this conversation, I'm not sure if I ever ask you questions, it's like, oh yeah, that's a little inside information. Just feel free to dance around it, and
No worries, I do it all the time. But yeah, I'm generally pretty transparent. But anything's going to get me in real trouble, I'll let you know afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. We can always take things out too, but those are the most important parts. Can you talk a little bit about the investment process itself? Can you kind of walk us through how it works? What's the investor looking for? What's the investee working for, and especially about the time frame, because I think a lot of people are unclear about how long does this take to work.
Yeah, so I think I spend a lot of time with people, and I always try to help entrepreneurs through. Like we make very few investments, to be honest, and like that's probably true across the board. But we're always trying to help people coming through the system. So I think the first thing is actually networking. Is actually getting to know important people. Using the term important for what you're trying to achieve, not necessarily important in the world. But yeah, I think early conversations and actually speaking to people who've been on the journey does help a lot. I can sort of talk about it, but yeah, if you're coming in for an investor pitch, you really want to have got a lot of feedback on what you talk about. And some investors are pretty laid back and just happy to help, but sometimes you only get one shot. So I think doing a lot of preparation before you're actually having the conversation is the key, and networking. Then to actually have the conversation, introductions make it so much easier. Uh, Everyone's sort of LinkedIn stalking and just shooting out random decks, but yeah, if you can get a warm introduction and as I said, framing it as an up and coming entrepreneur, love to pick your brains on this is often a better way to do it rather than can I have $200,000. So yeah, and that sort of goes back into the networking process. But to actually be taken seriously, though, you need to have a deck. And I worked at Boston Consulting Group. I was a slide monkey for a long time, churning out a lot of decks. But at the end of the day, it's really important to be taken seriously. Like the front few pages of the decks are generally all the same. There's sort of a bunch of news stats and how big the industry is, but then getting into the meat of it, of actually what makes your proposition different, and actually sort of mapping out where you're trying to go. I think lots of people are always scared to put projections in and all that sort of stuff because they may be wrong and people pick them apart, but you need to have something to have a conversation around. So just really being concise about what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and how it's going to make money to return some value to the investors who are putting capital in is probably sort of the simplest way of putting it. So I think it's a matter of getting a conversation, getting a deck, and then a lot of it's just right place, right time. There's lots of people in different cycles or in different conversations or focusing on different sectors. So yeah, there is a degree of luck involved, but yeah, sometimes you'll come across someone who has dry powder to deploy. The project you're talking about fits really well with some other stuff they're doing, and yeah, it can be quite a big process. But I think that my advice to everyone is everything takes longer than you plan, and just make sure you've got plenty of runway. Don't get yourself wedged, and you just see it happen time and again. Everyone thinks it's going to be easy, and I think my other advice is because people are so friendly and so happy to help, and that they sometimes give a false positive where yeah, they're nodding and smiling and being really receptive and encouraging, but realistically they're not going to write a check. So sometimes yeah, like no is actually the second best answer. It's greater to say yes, but a clear no is also good to yeah, don't don't string yourself along. And yeah, I think that's something I've learned over the years where you feel like you're almost there with someone, but you're actually not even close.
Yeah, yeah. It's so important to value their time, but also to value your time on how much you're going to spend on something. How important is it that to get an investor interested? How important is it that you're making money starting out?
It makes it a lot easier if you are, particularly in the current environment. I'd say 12 months ago, the answer would have been quite different. Unfortunately, the world's taken a bit of a turn for the worse recently. Maybe it's a needed correction, but yeah, a great idea with a hockey stick graph used to be enough to sometimes get you some significant money. Now, yeah, I think the time frame of to profitability or break even sustainability has shortened. So if you're actually generating revenue, it makes it a lot easier in the current environment. So whether or not you're actually making money, you need a solid plan of how you're going to make money. Just getting reach and work it out on the fly, we'll sort it out later. Be that work for Uber and Facebook, but if you're a small scale company early in the journey, I think a clear path to sustainability and then profitability is key, because as I was saying before, it's about runway. And if I'm thinking I'm going to give you $100,000, it's going to be gone in 12 months. If you can't raise again, then that's my money gone as well. So it makes it a lot easier if if you're already making money. If you're not, then just have a clear plan to sustainability.
Yeah, just having that system in place where money is actually coming in the door. I mean, just that first money, no matter what it is, makes a huge difference in all kinds of things. Do you find that a lot of investors are really investing in the founders more than the concept?
Yeah, yep, very much so. And I just see it time and time again. And people ask, what's the most important attribute for a founder? And I'll always say grit, because it's such a sexy space. It sounds so good, but it's bloody hard work, and there's always a lot of knocks along the way. It's always a lot harder. It takes a lot longer than planned. So I think one is you need to be convinced they're in there for the long haul. And there's plenty of studies to show that one of the best indicators of future performance when it comes to entrepreneurs, different to other investments, is actually past results. So if you've had some wins previously, you're more likely to be getting them again. So having that track record, which is tough when you're just starting out, but I think investors like to double down on proven people. But I think you really are going to struggle even if you've got a great idea if the investors don't believe in you or back you.
Yeah, if you're looking for the investment, you've got to be so excited that you get the investor excited about what it is that you're doing. And if that doesn't happen, you're probably in for a world of hurt down the road.
I think passion is really important, but sometimes overrated, because sometimes if you're passionate, make sure buy a ticket, be a fan. It can sometimes blind you, all the hype and the sexiness. But you need to be passionate about what you're doing. But there needs to be more than that as well. You need to be able to get people excited. But I always say, make sure you're not buying the hype while you're selling it. You need to have that solid base underneath, and know that there's a grind as well.
Yes. We were talking to Christian Bishop from Twitch the other day on monetization, and he kept using the word grind. Yeah. And he said, because we were talking about how do you get sponsors? He goes, grind. It's just like, that's what it is. And if you're
just like hunting the hogs at the start of World of Warcraft, there is a grind is brought into the games, and it's very much part of the industry for all the sexy moments. There's plenty of unsexy ones.
Yes. With Guinevere Capital or other organizations, but maybe with you in particular, when you make investments, what else do you do other than just write a check? Because there must be some kind of ongoing business relationship. I mean, you want them to succeed, and so what usually are you doing after you write the check?
Yeah, so us in particular, we're really hands on. So we're certainly not write checks and walk away. And I think most people in this space will always talk. They'll frame it as we want to add value beyond just money. But it's true. So a lot of them will be just after board seats or whatever, which is usually, even if it's not a board seat, it's board observer status. But with us, we don't get caught up on board meetings. We're even more cold face than that. So we will be sort of working side by side with the entrepreneur, and there's even sort of a mentorship type role as part of that. And I said a lot of our portfolio is about synergy. So we've got agency or tech resources in part of our portfolio. We look to try and get them working with other projects and collaborating. So I spent a lot of time chatting strategy with people. So we want people who are receptive. Like, we're not going to be overbearing and trying to micromanage, but at the same time, we want to be very involved in projects. And the reason we put money in is because we believe in it, and and the vision for where it's going. So we're really hands on and trying to help make that happen.
Is there any particular area that you find that founders are the least prepared for? Or that, are there certain areas that's like, man, we always have to provide this for people, and you just kind of build that in?
Yeah, money. I think money and time, as I said earlier on, people always underestimate how long it's going to take and how hard it is. There's always a rose tinted glasses, and you're looking at those big success stories out there. But just like for every Tom Cruise, there's 1,000 people waiting tables in Hollywood. There's for every massive success story, there's plenty at the other end of the spectrum. So yeah, we always just give them a reality check, make sure you've got more runway than you think you need, more capital than you think you need, and just don't get yourself wedged, because and esports is probably worse than most as far as you get labelled a shyster as soon as you're slightly late on a payment or a sketchy org owner or whatever. It's tough, and it's not even your bad plan or your planning or your fault all of the time. Like even some of the biggest brands in the world, they'll be late on payments. So that I think cash flow issues are the ones that really cause the most stress in the industry. The best planning in the world, there's always those X factors, whether it's black swan events like a pandemic or you think one of the biggest tech companies in the world can afford to pay on time, but they've got other priorities. So I think it's just building in plenty of buffer is the advice we keep telling people, and we see people getting caught out on fairly regularly.
Yes, I've worked in the PC business way back when. It was all just, man, people had no idea how close we were to not making the payments that we needed to stay in business. It was like closer than you would have thought. Are there some businesses that just aren't, some businesses in esports that just aren't really set up for investment? Or just
I think it's what you. I think there's community stuff which, again, is what it's almost separating out the CSR from the hardcore investment. I think there's a lot of things that probably aren't going to be profitable or return a good ROI, but that doesn't mean resources shouldn't go into them. A lot of the more community focused stuff, and I think it's one of the problems is you see franchises now with 8-figure, even 9-figure price tags, and everyone thinks that's the way you need to do it. It's not necessarily you need to do it. You can build a really cool organization without a lot of investment, and as soon as you take investment, the pressure is on you from those investors to start doing stuff that's going to make money, and that may not actually be what you want to do or what the best thing is for your organization. I think it's really think about what you're trying to achieve at the start, and the path to making the most money may be a different path to what the vision you had for the organization at the start. So I think you need to have some frank conversations with the people you're potentially going to be working with, and also think about yourself. Where do you want this to go? Because making money is not always doing the things you want to be doing.
Yeah, I think everyone thinks that it's like once you get the check, once you get the yes, then it's all smooth sailing.
That's when the pressure really comes on. You have to get a return on that money. Everyone thinks you gets funded and you made it, whereas that's when the hard work starts.
No, it's always been fascinating to me, because people that are really good at getting investment may not be the people that are really good at running a company. It's like it's like a different set of skills to do those. So I'm always really amazed when people are able to raise the money and then run the business well at the same time. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's like you've got to really be talented to make that work, I think.
That's right. And it always is focused, because we're always raising money with one hand while we're handing it out with the other. And I'd much prefer to be running businesses. That's the thing I'm passionate about. But unfortunately, the biggest value add at the moment, a lot of the time, is actually just going out and finding those big checks. So it's a balance for all founders, sort of trying to raise while actually trying to keep your eye on the ball and running a sustainable business.
Yes. So one of the things is just more from my education than anything else. Would you have a portfolio of companies there that you're putting money into? Is there ever any synergy between them? Do you try to get this company to work with this company? Do you put people together, organizations like that at all?
Yeah, that's our whole philosophy, really. So every acquisition we make either needs to fit with some of the existing companies or fit with a future theme we've got where we can see things coming together. So the idea is 1+1 is going to equal more than 2 with everything we bring into the portfolio. So that's very much our thesis. And I always try and get staff from across the portfolio to work together. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. You need to match the personalities a lot of the time, and you do have a lot of headstrong founders sometimes. But I think ideally, people, resources across their portfolio will collaborate and sort of create additional value.
No, because I've always thought that like if an esports team, an esports organization that needs sponsors, it's like if there are other companies that need customers, it's like, hey, look over here. If it's the right fit, if it's the right market. So how long were you at BCG?
A couple of years. So I was in Europe for 11 years, and I came back. I was actually the first external recruit into the Perth office back in 2011 to 2013. So we had a mining boom on at that stage. So everyone at BCG just gets dropped into sectors that they know nothing about. But I was all of a sudden telling some of Australia's biggest companies where they should be building mines and infrastructure and mapping out oil and gas economics across the world and all that sort of stuff. But it's an amazing experience. Just I love being the dumbest person in the room because you learn so much, and there's just a lot of really, really smart people there. And sometimes you learn best through pain. It was very long hours and high pressure, but it was a fantastic experience. And a lot of the people I work with today are all sort of from that era, ex-BCG or ex-management consultants, because we bonded, and I enjoy working with sort of smart, passionate people.
Was that after you went to business school?
Yeah, I did the MBA at Oxford. So I did a couple of startups in between, but then came back into consulting.
Do you think people that go through an MBA program these days that is any kind of there's some things you learn there that you can take into esports?
Yeah, very much so. I think MBAs oversell themselves because obviously it's a business for them as well. So they say you get an MBA from a good school, your life is made. That's not probably the case, but it's a great experience.
That's exactly what they told us at Stanford.
Yeah. I think it's great, particularly if you're coming out of a sort of a more technical. I trained as a physiotherapist originally, so it's good to give you sort of a broad knowledge. And I didn't even know what the terms like NPV and IRR meant. I'm probably not sitting down a spreadsheet calculating these days, but at least you know the lingo, so it lets you learn enough of a lot of things to make a difference. It's nice. It's a nice stamp on your CV, but it's also a network, an alumni network for Oxford or Stanford. It's a great it's a great group to have. So it was fantastic for me. But I think you want to do it for the right reasons. Don't just do it just as a checkbox. It's a lot of work, and you're taking yourself out of the game for a bit to focus on it. So make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and it's part of a broader strategy.
Yes, yeah. When I went, everyone was going to investment banking. And a couple of years ago, I was talking to the people at Stanford. They're like, "No, everyone's going into startups." I mean, it's just that's everyone's goal.
Yeah, we probably had the most successful startups out of our year because Lehman Brothers went down the first week of my MBA. So I did 2008, 2009. I always remember I was sitting next to a girl from Lehman Brothers, and she was the only happy person in the room because they'd prepaid her MBA, but she had to work there 3 years afterwards, and she was off the hook. But it was fascinating.
The only person on earth.
But it was they were rewriting the course as we went through. But there was no jobs out the other side of it. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that came out. But it's great to see. Like I don't know if you've heard of Seeders. They're a crowdfunding platform. That came out of it. They exited the other day. There's been a lot of great entrepreneurs come out of that era. And they said the same thing happened in the .com boom before. That's where Facebook came out of, and now they're saying out of this recession, the pandemic, that there's a theory that the next wave of innovation and entrepreneurs will come out of this by necessity because the consulting and the investment banking jobs just aren't there.
Yes, I think there's something to that. Now, was Excel Esports the biggest deal that you've done, or one of the biggest deals that you've done through Guinevere?
the beauty of it, it wasn't back when we did it, but now it's by far the biggest asset because we bought it well before the LEC days. So yeah, we were happy to run it as a UK entity, sort of a sort of a lower tier local organisation. But we knew that LEC franchising was on the horizon. So yeah, so we obviously working with the founders there, the two brothers, put together a proposal, and then we were lucky enough to have some fantastic sort of big private equity backers who were prepared to come in if Excel got that license. So yeah, it was actually a very small investment at the start, but yeah, has grown to a huge one. As I said, we've been diluted down significantly along that journey, but I don't think that the actual valuations have ever been revealed. But yeah, it was the Sun was, or the Sky News was talking about being close to 100 million and raising 20 million last year. So and I think it's a good case study too by getting some good partners and investors on early. They can then the next round attract a lot of big money from the city and some great investors and brands. So yeah, Excel's been an amazing journey. I did a lot of the hard yards early on as chairman. I think when we got in the LEC, there was only sort of 3 employees, me being one of them. So now they've got 50 plus, and yeah, I'm very much a passive guy, giving a little bit of advice here and there. But yeah, early on it was tough work to get up and running because we got into the LEC late November, and like we were supposed to be playing mid January, so I had to get entire performance stuff, facilities in Berlin. We're based in the UK. Yeah, it was a bumpy ride those first couple of years, but still a lot of work to be done. But it's come a long way, and obviously the valuations have reflected that. I think we've done some great work at Excel, but even the LEC slots themselves, they were worth 10 million for the first 10 that got in. One changed hands when Schalke had to exit 28.5 million, and then there's talk of 40 million plus was what the last one went out valuation wise. So yeah, if you position yourself in the right places, there's huge capital appreciation just on the underlying franchise assets themselves, no matter what you do on top.
What I keep hearing you talking about, which I think is really interesting, is that the role of the publishers in all of this, because we were talking earlier on about traditional sports. Traditional sports isn't set up the same way. I mean, no one owns football. No one owns baseball here in the U.S. No one owns basketball. But the owners that own the IP there, I mean, it just seems like that's got to make it. One of the things I keep hearing you talk about is you're talking about the publishers, and the publishers have such a big role to play. But it sounds like you're on top of that.
Yeah, I think it's key to understand there's key stakeholders, and the balance of power is probably shifting slightly where so some of the stronger esports teams are almost endorsing new games with their involvement. But yeah, they are key stakeholders, as you say. It's very different to traditional sports in that sense, but they're not all the same. So I think Riot's probably at one end of the spectrum where they're very vertically integrated and hands-on, but then you've got Valve making some great games who, yeah, sort of dark men in the background, and you've got no idea who's behind the games a lot of the time, and that gives a lot more opportunities for third parties to do stuff. And there's a lot more grey areas probably in their ecosystem where, yeah, with someone like Riot Games, is very black and white what you can and can't do with their IP. So they're different models, and I think you need to yeah, understand the ecosystem you're playing in and who you're playing with, and sometimes you need to keep really close to the publishers, and sometimes it's a bit more of a free for all, which gives you more freedom, but there's other risks associated.
So when you're talking about Excel Esports, you say that it was started by two brothers. One of the things we always like to talk about here is how things started out, because in our audience, we have people that are thinking, I want to go start this, I want to go start this, and the founding stories of some of the really successful organizations out there can be really interesting to people. But you said it started by two brothers.
Yeah, it's a great story. So when we first came to UK, I knew a few of the Riot Games guys. I was asking around who are the best founders and up and coming, and they pointed to these two brothers. Actually, there was another set of brothers. There was two teams, two different sets of brothers. But we'd met them a few times, and then we were over there we're boot camping before 2018 MSI, which is in Berlin, with a team I'd qualified with at the time. So yeah, spent a bit of time with the brothers, and yeah, it just really clicked. Their story, you can look it up online. They founded in a pub in a university. One of them was actually had a real job. One was finishing his degree, and they decided they wanted to start an esports team. And then they managed to. Again, this is back in the good old days. It was much easier. Print out some T-shirts and sort of chip in a little bit of money to get a team to a COD LAN, and they were just the loudest, most passionate at the time, and just got some momentum there. But there's all these great stories of back in the day, sort of starting a Twitter account and printing a few T-shirts and entering a team and winning your way up, and then before you know it, you've got an esports org. It's a fantastic story. But on the flip side, I think too many people get caught up in that rags to riches mystique, where these days you can still do it, but it's a completely different game. You're not going to start a G2 from scratch overnight anymore. There's just a huge first mover advantage and huge amounts of capital that have been put into certain organisations now. That's very hard to reel in. The Excel story with the brothers is fantastic. The Homes derbies, but it's probably a great lesson as well, because those two aren't actually involved in the organisation anymore. They were part of the journey, and Direwolves as well. One of the other ones I originally was invested in. The founders are no longer part of that as well. It goes along the lines of what you're saying. Sometimes founding and so starting an organisation are very different from scaling an organisation that's worth 8 or 9 figures. It's sort of the different parts of the journey. But like, if you look at Kieran, though, he's done fantastically well. He now works for Formula E, an area sort of again another sort of high growth industry. He's gallivanting around the world doing events. He's having a fantastic time, and Joel's in cybersecurity now, etc. He was ex sort of Big Four firm, so that's sort of more his passion. So it was an amazing story of Excel, where it came from to where it is today. There's a lot of different people that are part of that journey.
That's really. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how those things work out. I've always been amazed when I worked at Netflix starting out. The same guys who started Netflix are still running it today, and it's just like to be able to take it. I mean, when I was there, it was really, really small, but it's the same guys for the most part that are running it today. So they were able to make that transition in a really big way. Now, I know you've done a lot of international travel. You said you're talking about going to the Middle East and so on. What's going on in the Middle East, would you say, in esports in particular? Did you go to Next World?
Yeah, I did, which is it's slightly controversial. There was a lot of people there, who's of the industry, but not a lot of people tweeting about it. But I really wanted to go and have a look and meet the people involved. I think like even in Dubai, there's been a huge amount of investment. I've sat down with Paul Roy, the Galaxy guys. Next World Forum. I think my takeaway is that they're not messing around. They're serious. Just the investment in the forum itself, but everything else.
We're going to quote you on that one.
Yeah, it's and like you see it everywhere in traditional sports as well. That I've heard they're making 50 billion a month profit out of Armico, the oil company. So they're redeploying it into future-facing industries. And they were talking there. They've got 12 pillars. Gaming and esports is one of them. It's probably one of the smallest pillars, but they say the statistics are it's the fastest growing pillar. So there's obviously some controversy around the region, and they've tried to sponsor some things, and there's been some controversy in LEC with the Neom sponsorship. But I think I always want to see things from my own eyes. I was lucky enough to speak to Prince Faisal directly, and they were, a lot of these guys are Western educated, schools, universities, incredibly articulate. He stood up to start, talked to his vision of esports and gaming, taking Saudi and the region into the future, and that's both economically and progressing in other ways. So I found it incredibly interesting. The numbers they're talking are just off the charts, and we're partnered with the league we run in Oceania with the ESL. They bought out ESL and Face It for 1.5 billion. They've invested heavily in a lot of the publishers. I think a lot of people don't realise behind the scenes how much money is actually flowing into the publishers. and they'll stand up and say directly, like China is probably proving it with Tencent and Alibaba, like heavily investing in this sector is paying massive dividends, and they're trying to go down a similar path. So yeah, it was a fascinating time there, and as I said, there was a lot of people from all over the world there, esports world there that I hadn't seen for a while. It was actually good to get together with people. Yeah, fascinating. There's speaking to some of the locals, like you walk outside, it's 45 degrees, and yeah, it's a tough existence. There's
45
definitely
degrees
Celsius, yeah, which or centigrade, which is very high in Fahrenheit.
Hey,
There's a lot hotter than it ever gets in Australia.
The only reason I know how much that is I was at the Sydney Zoo one day, and it was 40 degrees, and we were dying. So I can't imagine what 45 must be like.
It was hot. It was hot. So yeah. So long story short, there's a huge amount of investment coming out of this region, and like not just Riyadh, Saudi. I think there's a bit of competition actually between Saudi, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. And this isn't just in esports and gaming. This is just one of many sectors that they're investing heavily in. I think the publishers are really keen on the space because the ARPU is off the charts. They invest or more. Every user is investing a hell of a lot more than in other regions, and potentially like a whale. I've heard from some publishers in the MENA region or in Middle Eastern region is just off the charts compared to the spend from some other regions. So I think there's a huge return from publishers investing in the region, and getting servers in that region is big for the development of the region. And I think they have a genuine philosophy of using esports and gaming to develop the whole country and the ecosystem there. Saudi's only 70 years old, so if you look at where Australia was after 70 years, they've got a long way to go, but I think they've made a lot of progress on some fronts too.
So it sounds like
but, I'm very careful talking about it because you see some other people on social media get torn apart from it. I'm trying to be very neutral and centrist, I guess.
No, because we don't talk politics here, just because we don't do it. But we also have to be aware that politics impacts everything, and esports in particular, especially on an international scale like that. We just try to avoid any kind of controversy. There's enough other places for people to do that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a lot of interest here in the U.S. on what's going on over there, but it's not always as straightforward of a conversation. It gets complicated really quickly there. So no, that sounds great. So it sounds like you'll be going back there.
Yeah, this the first time I've been to over 90 countries now. I'd love to go everywhere at least once. As I said, it's 45 degrees outside. The nice buildings are absolutely unbelievable. Like the Four Seasons is incredible structure, but there probably aren't as many of them around. Whereas I think it's probably a bit more similar to the first time I went to Dubai was in 2000, and I think there's going to be a lot of construction. And if you go to Dubai now, the Palm, it's an amazing place. Whereas I think they've got a lot of work to do on the construction, but they've obviously got a plan and a vision both for Riyadh and then obviously some futuristic cities they're looking at. Are incredibly ambitious. If they can pull it off, it'll be quite impressive.
So, is their plan? Basically, I mean, are they looking to develop esports within their country or globally?
Both. So they have a huge focus on within their country, and a lot of what they're saying was quite patriotic. But at the same time, I think that they also want to be global players, and that's more economically. So I think they want to develop their own teams and people and players, systems. Falcon Esports has been quite successful on the global stage, but at the same time, I think they want to again diversifying from an oil-based economy. They want game publishers. They want more tech startups. They want more happening within Saudi, which will be drivers of revenue in the future. And I think you're already seeing sort of studios and infrastructure relocate to the region, and they're investing heavily with incentives to make that happen. But it's a smart long-term move.
Anything that I hear about it over there is I don't hear any missteps. It sounds like they seem to be putting their money in basically the right places and looking at it as a long-term situation. rather than just, oh, isn't this fun? Let's play games.
Yeah, yeah. Prince Father would have changed it. Was basically like, we're going to do less talking and more walking, and that's what they're doing at the moment. But it's a great situation to be in when you've got actually all these free cash flows coming in from the oil business. They're in a very unique position. So, but yeah, they're playing it smart in my view as far as taking a very very long term view. But there's many factors in the region that you need to take into consideration.
Yes. It's kind of like going back to getting an investment from an investor. I mean, there's a responsibility with all that money. I mean, you're getting all that money in, but you've got to figure out what to do with it. You know, it's a nice problem to have, but it can be a problem. The last question that we always ask everyone here is the Olympics. Should esports be part of the Olympics? Why or why not?
This was actually at the forum, and they had the person responsible in the Olympics for the digital sports there, which was fascinating because like I've always had my very strong views, and he was wedged between someone from I think it was Chester King from Global Esports Federation and UK Esports, and these are the guys I thought would be the cheerleaders. And my strong views has always been the Olympics need esports more than esports needs the Olympics. But yeah, they all stood up there and said no, it shouldn't be part of the Olympics. So the
guy from the Olympics was saying that?
Yeah. Which I thought, well, let's be, but like, I'll caveat that not as part of the core Olympics, but there should be parallel events which make it a festival of traditional sports and esports. But yeah, their hard red line is that we know violent sports. Like you'll never see Counter-Strike or Call of Duty in the Olympics, or even associated events. But but their view is something like sports sims, so it's like sailing or something like that, will be part of the Olympics, but they're more digital versions of traditional sports, which don't really attract or resonate that much with the core esports community. But similar to seen in the Commonwealth Games, there's no reason there can't be a lead-in massive festival of esports and gaming, or even parallel to try and attract a younger demographic. So I think you're going to see them doing more and more with esports and gaming, but probably less so with you've got your 100 meters final gold medalist standing on a podium, then the next minute your esports FIFA player is walking up there collecting the same medal. But I think they see it's an incredibly important part of the strategy. But I think finally everyone sat down together and realised, as we touched on earlier, the publishers own the IP. So yeah, it's very difficult for you to suddenly yoink that. And like back when I was in sports consulting, I helped write a strategy for Swimming Australia back in 2012, which was after a pretty poor London Olympics. And sort of what came out of that was that from a commercial point of view, they lost the commercial rights for the important 4 weeks of every 4-year cycle, which was the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics. So as a team owner or as a publisher, why would I suddenly be handing my IP over to these guys, my players, my contracts, everything over to these guys to commercialize and make money off themselves? And yeah, I don't think we need the extra legitimacy or eyeballs from a one-off tournament at these events.
Yeah. Reginald here has actually gotten us in touch with Vincent Piera there from the Olympics, because one of the things that we wanted to talk to him about, and maybe we will at some point, was that if the Olympics if esports comes into the Olympics in any kind of fashion, just from a job standpoint, it will create so many jobs around the world. Because a lot of times what especially here in the US, we don't really realize is what it takes, all the preparation, all the qualifications to get there is just amazing.
And this conversation they had actually resonated with my views as well. Like is it a sport or is it not? Is it an Olympics or is it not? It just doesn't matter. But what does matter is for government funding, support, and everything around it. At the moment, there's a checkbox you need to unlock that. And the problem is, because we're not in that traditional box, the esports misses out on a lot of support, infrastructure, etc. So we just need to create a new box that sits next to sport and next to Olympics. Which means we can get government funding, support funding for pathways, etc., to support the industry. But yeah, I think people are just being lazy, just trying to fit it into the traditional sports or traditional Olympic box, which already does have its funding pathway sorted out. We just need a parallel pathway that makes sense, because it just doesn't fit in the in the current one.
Yes, there's a roadmap there. All people have to do is kind of follow it. So yeah, because we've been talking to some people in Africa in particular that I've had conversations with, that there's so much money going into traditional sports funding from the government, and they're trying to do just exactly what you're describing. It's like, how can we don't want them to get less money. We just want to figure out how to get on a track to be able to get some funding for what it is that they're doing. So, hey, this has been great. I mean, I could keep going. Respectful of your time there.
Yeah, I've got all day. I said my UK day starts in a few hours, but I'm all good at the moment. But
no, really appreciate your conversation here on investment, because a lot of times, usually our audience is from around the world. A lot of times our guests are from around the world, around in emerging markets. But I just thought it was really interesting to have an opportunity to talk to you there in Australia. I do not consider Australia an emerging market. It's like, no,
I've got no excuse for making no money.
So, but it's really interesting, I think, for people to hear how investment has worked in esports for you, because, and again, it's a really long conversation for people to have with themselves and others. But hey, I really appreciate it. Where can people find you online?
On LinkedIn, I think it's /DHarris1. But yeah, mainly Twitter's the best place. So at Dave Harris Oz, so DAVEHARRISAUS.
Great. We'll put some links in here when we publish this episode. Dave, it's been a great conversation. This is the Gamers Change Lives podcast, season 2. Follow the money, play games, create jobs, change lives. Thanks for listening.